so much for all your support in my breakdown in my last video. I really did not want to refilm it. It was my honest reaction to this case, and I expected some more backlash than I got, so thank you so much for that. Sean and I will be filming a 1500 subscriber this or that video probably later on this week. I have to bribe him. He's not much for whispering, really, so hopefully I can get him to, but we'll see. I already told him he's doing it, so I don't know if that's not bribery, but I don't know, I'll figure something out. Anyway, tonight we're going to talk about another missing persons case, and this is actually one that sounds pretty familiar to me, but I don't know if it's because it's eerily similar to the Patty Vaughn case, which I did previously. It was a very short video because there was like no information on that at all, but I saw this one and I researched it and I was like, dude, I know what happened, and when I tell you guys about it, you'll know what happened, but for whatever reason, no one's been convicted or anything, so I thought it was kind of odd, and anytime I find something kind of odd, I share it with you, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't like this. So anyway, tonight we are going to talk about Vicki Lynn Nisbett. We're going to go all the way back to October of 1991. Vicki's maiden name was Johnson, and in October of 1991, she and her three sons, who were aged 7, 5, and 3, they decided to move out from the house where she lived with her high school sweetheart and husband of roughly 12 years, Rex Nisbett. Vicki and her sons moved into their own apartment. She opened a separate bank account, and in November of 91, she filed for divorce. She said it was to escape years of Rex's physical abuse and drug use. She began dating other men and, by all accounts, was moving on with her life. And then the holidays rolled around, and Rex showed up. He needed a place to live, for he was not fond of working. Vicki is nicer than me and offered to let him stay at the apartment through Christmas. On Friday, December 13th, she got paid. She put her paycheck in her bank account and paid her rent. Saturday the 14th was her company's Christmas party, and she was getting ready to go out when the arguing began. Rex did not want her to go to this party. He had already thrown away or hidden 2 different outfits that Vicki had planned to wear. Vicki's friend and coworker Julie Cohen-Tower had called around 2:30 that afternoon to make sure that she and Vicki were still going to the party, and Vicki said yes, but added that she and Rex were arguing about it. Let me tell you, I would not be arguing with my ex about what I was wearing to a party, because he would not have any say. Anyway, Julie called again around 5 p.m. to find out what time Vicki would be picking her up, and Vicki was really upset at this time and said that she and Rex were still arguing and he had just choked her, and she had hoped that he had left bruises so that she could use it against him, presumably in court. Julie told Vicki to hang up the phone and come to her house to finish getting ready, and they could just go to the party together from there. At around 6 p.m., a man named Wayne Castleberry, whom Vicki had just recently met and she was dating, called the house or apartment to ask about their plans for that night after the party. Rex picked up the phone to he had done with her. And of course, he could not face the confrontation, so he hung up the phone like a giant wuss. Later on that morning, he called her again and he asked for her help to get medicine for one of the kids. And she apparently did help him and went inside the apartment when she came over, and she saw that there had been a shrine, like, built for Vicki on the table. I don't know. Okay, we'll talk about it at the end. But the strange details continue to mount in this case. Apparently, Rex took several months to tell Vicki's parents that she was missing. And even after that, he still forbade them from seeing their grandchildren. In fact, he told Vicki's mother that he couldn't cater to visits because he had to protect himself. From what? From what? He also told Vicki's mother that he hired an independent investigator to find Vicki, and he said that he paid this investigator $30,000 in cash, but wouldn't name the investigator, and Vicki's parents never heard from one. Eventually, Rex began telling them he thought that Vicki had been murdered and disposed of by Kenneth McDuff, a serial killer reportedly responsible for at least 14 murders, including 6 in Central Texas around the time that Vicki went missing. McDuff was eventually executed after being convicted for the murder of a woman that he assaulted in a car wash in 1991. Investigators contacted Robert James, Rex's coworker, and he told them that Rex once said that he'd want to kill his wife if he caught her cheating, but then said that, he would never actually do it. It wasn't the Christian thing to do, he said. Investigators spoke with Vicki's brother, Mark Johnson, who had once gone to Rex's brother's property, which was north of Austin, and noted a large excavation hole there. He said that Rex noticed and observed that while they were on the property, you could bury a body in one of the holes and no one would know, because that's not obvious. But officials eventually searched the property and they found no trace of Vicki. Officer David Proctor, who took the missing persons report, noted at trial that when he arrived at the apartment, it was immaculate. He recalled this only because he had been called to the apartment twice before in the 2.5 short months that Vicki had lived there, and both times he noticed that she wasn't the tidiest housekeeper, so it was strange that he came in and everything was immaculate. The first call in early November of 91 came when Vicki had a guy over, and Rex had been watching through the windows, because he's a stage 10 creeper, and he proceeded to assault this new guy. The second call was when Vicki had asked for assistance in getting a restraining order to keep Rex away from the apartment. This officer did give her the information and advised her not to be alone with Rex, advice that she did not take, obviously. On both occasions, this officer noticed the house was messy, but as he took down information, he noted, for the missing persons report, he noted how clean the place was, like I mentioned. Now, the only altercation that day had been this argument, Rex said. He downplayed the fact that he choked her. He said that she had charged at him and he had only simply pushed her away for his own protection. He told Officer Proctor that Vicki left the apartment wearing a black jacket and black pants. He claimed that Vicki had run off with some other man or run to a friend's house showing where the struggle had likely started and ended. One was on the carpet near the entrance to the bedroom, and the second one was in one of the closets. Although Clark could not easily see any blood with the naked eye, he cut the carpet in the closet and found that the blood had soaked down into the padding underneath. There was also a blood stain on the drywall near the entrance to the bedroom, above the other carpet stain, and near the light switch there was a faint, bloody handprint. Both of these tested positive for human blood, so it wasn't just random, I don't know what other kind of random blood you get. Dog? I don't know. All three of the boys were in the apartment the afternoon that Vicki disappeared. CPS interviewed them and they repeated the same answer to their mother's whereabouts. They all said, "Mommy went to a party." When they were asked if they saw her leave, they said no, they did not, but that she went to a party. Rex never allowed investigators access to the boys, so they were not interviewed by the police. The amount of circumstantial evidence reinforced investigators' belief that Vicki's bedroom was a crime scene, and further supported Rex's standing as the primary suspect. Officials considered him nervous during investigations. He would show up at the apartment while deputies looked around to insist that they wouldn't find anything. Captain Richard Elliott invited him to the sheriff's office, and Rex agreed, but sent an attorney there in his place. Investigators thought that he'd adopted a consciousness of guilt from the moment Vicki went missing. There was a cop in Cedar Park who saw Vicki's car bounding north on Highway 183. He ran a plate scan between 9:30 and 9:35 that night, and the car was registered to Rex and Vicki. The officer testified that he'd only partially seen the driver. They had short, dark hair, which unfortunately applied to both Rex and Vicki, and he could not recall if the driver had been a woman or a man. There was Kelly Nisbett. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. She was a neighbor in Vicki's complex. Kelly told investigators she was. At one point I put him and at one point I put her. Okay, well, Kelly, could be a girl or a guy, told investigators they saw a woman they thought was Vicki standing in the parking lot one night, 2 weeks after her disappearance. This woman was wearing a black jacket and black pants and stood very still, looking toward the complex before eventually turning and leaving. This person, Kelly, said that they were 99% sure that it was Vicki. So what was she doing? Just standing there looking? Was she trying to see if Rex was still there? I don't know. And then there was Diane Kagan, Vicki's coworker, who saw Vicki's car at the HEB on Palmer and Mopac, December 28th, 1991. I'm assuming this is some kind of convenience store or something, but either way, when Diane came back on January 3rd, the car was gone. She saw it again on January 4th in the same location as before. It left again, then showed up in the same spot in February. Detectives asked Rex if they could search it, but Rex sought out his attorney like a wussy. They eventually got a warrant, but the only detail of interest was that the dome light had been yanked out. So, 1 month after Vicki goes missing, detectives lay a trap for Rex. Assistant Chief Deputy Richard Elliott, whom I mentioned before, asked Vicki's mother to call Rex and tell him that Vicki's body had been found and that they needed him to identify it. Investigators sat outside Rex's apartment in unmarked cars, watching to see if he would lead them to the place where he put Vicki's body. Elliott testified that Rex Nisbett's car was broken down, so even if he wanted to, he probably couldn't have. They do say that killers tend to go back, and Ted Bundy went back a lot. Texas Health Science Center. The right index finger and right palm print came back as a match to Rex Nisbett's prints. The blood tested positive for being human blood, type A positive. Both Vicki and Rex have that blood type, so it's unclear at first whose blood it was. Pieces of the carpet and padding from inside the closet were submitted in early 1992 for DNA testing. Now, there was no way to collect DNA from Vicki. Investigators collected blood from her parents to do reverse parentage testing. The tests came back at the probability of Earl and Carol Johnson being parents of the contributing unknown female as 99.9999999, you get it, percent for the stain on the carpet, and 99.82% for the stain on the padding. Earl and Carol had 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son. The other 2 children, besides Vicki, were excluded because the lab had their DNA samples to compare, so this left Vicki as the contributor of the blood. Due to the sheer volume of the blood in the bedroom, it was clear to investigators that Vicki had been gravely injured in that room. Although investigators were confident that there was sufficient evidence to move forward, the 2 previous district attorneys did not agree, so the case was never presented to a grand jury. Rex was indicted in March of 2013. Now, over the last 20-some-odd years, Captain Elliott, now Chief Elliott, never let this case fall by the wayside, which is awesome to me because we have seen some cases together, you and I, where they just stop doing anything. So, Chief Elliott reopened the case every 5 or 6 years. In 92, 97, 2003, 2007, 2013, in an attempt to get more definitive DNA results. Each time that the case was reopened, pieces of the carpet and padding from both areas in the bedroom were submitted to DPS or to UNT. Each time that the new testing was requested, new samples of either blood or saliva from Carol and Earl Johnson were also resubmitted. Can you imagine being her family and having to submit your DNA over and over and over? I mean, I'd be thankful that they were still trying, but whew. Anyway, in 2013, when the case was reopened again, Jane Burgett, who is fondly known as DNA Jane at DPS, was contacted, and she was asked if there was any evidence left worth testing. She went digging, and she found that Devane Clark had taken a piece of drywall from the bedroom, which could not be tested in 1992 because testing was not sophisticated enough, and they had frozen the entire sample. Jane also found that another technician had taken scrapings from the drywall with the handprint, and also frozen those in 1997, along with some pieces of the carpet from the closet. She found that the carpet padding had been completely depleted by previous testing, but felt that she had plenty to work with. The piece of drywall, which in March of 1992 tested positive for human blood, came back in March of 2014 with the 99.99% of the population excluded as the biological child of Carol and Earl, meaning that the unknown female contributor of that blood could not be excluded as their biological child. It should be noted here that UNT and DPS use different terminology to explain their testing, which complicates things a bit when you're presenting it to a jury or you guys. But maybe someday we'll get to a point where agencies can simply say, this blood belongs to Vicki. The scrapings from the drywall with the handprint, which also tested positive for human blood, and a positive match for Rex's right ring finger and palm, were found in March of 2014 to be a mixture of DNA. Rex, according to DPS, could not be excluded as a contributor, and this same unknown female from the other piece of drywall could also also not be excluded. In other words, the drywall stain was a mixture of Vicki and Rex's DNA. The carpet from the closet also contained Vicki's DNA. So, you might be listening to me and you might be thinking, Shannon, what the heck? This is like cut and dry, right? Why wasn't he arrested? So, Captain Elliot and his team did an amazing job investigating this case from the beginning. And I don't think it was ever a question of who done it. The problem has always been that Vicki's body has never been found, and Rex never confessed. Some prosecutors believe that with no body and no confession, there can be no conviction. After all, Vicki Nisbett could have run off to California or Mexico, right? Well, that's what Rex has been telling people for 23 years, but Chief Elliot and his team have known differently all along. Rex told the police that after Vicki left for the party, he stayed home all night with his boys. But 3 weeks after Vicki's disappearance, a neighbor, Morris Bubba, I love it when people go by Bubba, I don't know why, Smith, came forward and he told the police that Rex, whom he barely knew, had asked him to babysit his boys for an hour or two the night that Vicki disappeared. Rex also asked to borrow Bubba's car, and Bubba said that he thought it was odd that someone he barely knew would ask that he babysit 3 small children and borrow his car. But he agreed reluctantly. Bubba's sister and roommate at the time, Lana Reed, went to the video store to rent movies for Bubba and the boys to watch that night. Police were able to retrieve the receipt from the video store to verify that Lana rented movies on the night of the 14th, the night of Vicki's disappearance. Bubba said Rex was gone for an hour to an hour and a half, and he later added that when he saw his car the next morning, he was pretty mad because some of the chrome pieces on the front end of his '69 Chevy Nova had been broken off, and they were sitting in the back seat. Also, the lock on the trunk had been broken. Rex, of course, had no explanation as to why the car looked like it had been four-wheeling, or why he desperately needed in that trunk. This car was eventually searched, and nothing was suspicious. Now, one of the best moments in preparation for the trial that I keep mentioning, but that I'll get to, was when detectives were searching through old photos of Vicki's car, which was found abandoned in an HEB parking lot 2 months after she ran off to California, supposedly in the car they just found. They came across a grainy photo of a checkbook on the passenger seat. It had been taken out of the glove compartment when DPS was processing the car. Some smart person got out a magnifying glass and looked really closely at this checkbook, but they could only make out 2 numbers. Rex had admitted he had written a check, number 698, from Vicki's personal account 5 days after she left. And Vicki's bank records revealed she had been using this pad of checks that started at 651 and ended at 675. Detectives contacted Chief Art Esvindo with the Austin Police Department and asked if his forensic photo labs could enhance the negative of this photo with only a few days' notice. He agreed to help without hesitation, and the negative was sent over. They enhanced it, and amazingly, it was the pad of checks numbered 676 to 700. So, how could Rex explain writing a check from a checkbook that was in Vicki's car that Vicki was supposedly driving on her way to California? That this book of checks was in Vicki's glove box, put Rex in his wife's car the day she ran away with it, or after she ran away with it. The one thing that seemed very revealing to police from the beginning is that Rex never professed his innocence. In a press conference when he was first indicted, they made the mistake of calling him homeless, as he was a drifter and difficult to months, they listened to him whine and complain and call the police every single name in the book because they humiliated him by calling him homeless. Never once did he complain that they had called him a murderer, just homeless. He spent many, many hours on the phone with one of his brothers who helped Rex with everything he needed, getting the medications, contacting witnesses, clothes for court, talking to the lawyers. But not one time did he ask his brother for help in finding Vicki. If I were in the Williamson County Jail facing many, many years in prison for a crime I did not commit, and I knew that my spouse was out there somewhere, the only thing I would say to every single person I came in contact with would be, please find my spouse. Please help me. But I didn't do this. I don't deserve to be here. We have to find out who really did. So, from the beginning of this case, it was about getting Vicki's body back to her family. Her parents were not out for vengeance. They were not asking to see Rex go to jail for life. They just wanted to know where Vicki was. Now, prosecutors made an offer for 15 years for manslaughter in return for Vicki's remains. But Rex refused to give up her body. He even said in a phone call to his brother he would take 30 years, but he just couldn't give the police what they wanted. Police believe that he wouldn't give them what they wanted. He wouldn't give them what they wanted, not that he couldn't. So, they have evidence that Rex and Vicki, I keep wanting to say Ricky, were arguing. He choked her in a fight the night that she disappeared. He lied and said he was home all night, but they have proof that he left the boys with a neighbor for an hour or two. He never explained why the car was damaged when he returned it, and we have evidence of a struggle that caused Vicki to bleed all over the master bedroom. Her blood and DNA were on the drywall, the carpet padding, and Rex's bloody handprint was nearby. And the best evidence was the testing from the DNA that proved that it was a mixture of Rex and Vicki's DNA. This placed him at the scene. Okay. The defense strategy was to convince the jury that there was not that much blood in the bedroom, and to mention other things that react to luminol, such as horseradish and animal blood. The defense also stressed that Vicki could have just run away because, the prosecutor's witness from DPS did an excellent job detailing all the places that she'd been. Now, there's no evidence that Vicki is alive and well, living it up in California or anywhere else. After they got the case, the jury deliberated for 22 hours and sent several notes saying that they were stuck 7-5. Once the judge read the Allen charge, the jurors went back to the jury room and started from scratch. They laid out all the evidence, went through the timeline of the night of the 14th, piece by piece. They looked at the charts that the prosecutors had created that spelled out the results of 23 years of DNA testing, examined the pictures of the crime, and finally made a unanimous decision. Rex is guilty. Now, it was odd that the defense attorneys did not ask for a lesser included of manslaughter in the charge, but they didn't. And the jury came back with a question after a full day of deliberation about whether they could convict Rex of a lesser charge than murder. Obviously, the jury was ready to compromise, but due to a judgment call on the part of his defense team, it was all or nothing. Now, in closing, the prosecution did not ask the jury for a specific number of years. How do you put a number on leaving 3 young boys motherless? They asked that they only consider what a mother is worth. The jury came back with 42 years. I have to take a drink, I'm sorry. This thing in my throat has still never gone away. And sometimes it hurts. You guys ask me if whispering hurts. Usually not, but sometimes. Anyway, the jury was not asked how they came up with the far as I can tell, none of them have ever spoken about that night, but they were pretty young. Now, here's where you're like, Shannon, again, cut and dry, what are we doing here? Why is it such a mystery? In 2016, Rex's conviction was overturned. The court ruled that the prosecutors failed to provide enough evidence that he killed her. Rex's family has said that this is something they believed in for a long time, and released a statement that said, "We are pleased that the Court of Appeals followed the law and determined what we have always known, that Rex is innocent." They overturned the conviction, and because they found that there wasn't enough evidence to support it, they actually rendered an acquittal, which means he's been found not guilty, and he will walk free. His lawyer said that he never should have been prosecuted, that she thought the prosecution of Rex was irresponsible and reckless to begin with because there simply wasn't evidence there to support the conviction. Now, I can't find out. I looked, and maybe somebody can find it. I can't find out if he was actually released. I assume that he was. I could not find any further information on this story. I looked for updates. I typed in the year. I searched everywhere. As far as I know, they have never found her, and he is walking free. I cannot believe that they overturned his conviction. I cannot, that just, like, I don't understand. And why wouldn't he lead them? Maybe he disposed of the body so well that in an hour and a half that he couldn't take them to her because he burned her, couldn't remember where he buried her, sludged her up with some, what's the word I'm looking for? Apparently I don't, lime. Oh goodness. All I saw was Ski Ulrich in Riverdale. Pouring the stuff on the body. My brain is so twisted. Anyway, I definitely think he killed her. I think he, and I don't know, because we did that one case where, Rachel, where the I have had a rough day. The investigators, the DNA experts said that the trunk of a car is very hard to clean properly. So, let's say he borrowed